Welcome to my bite-sized tutorials on creating a stunning forest using Procedural Content Generation, in short PCG, inside of Engine 5. In this 3-part series, I guide you through each step of the process from setting up the initial PCG volume, which we're gonna do in this chapter 1, to populating it with diverse foliage full of trees, grass and rocks. These chapters are designed to help you harness the power of PCG and to bring a cool and believable forest to life. Without any further ado, let's get started. Welcome to chapter 1, and in this chapter 1 we're gonna start with the basics of setting up PCG and then start creating first PCG environment for this exercise here. So we're gonna make sure first, before we begin, is to make sure your PCG plugins first enabled, and the one we're gonna be using is the first one here, framework, because we don't really need to care about the other ones that are more technical to use. So in this case we're gonna use this first one, so make sure we restart. So to begin with, let's create our folder first, PCG, call it PCG, double click, right click, and then let's go and create a pillar PCG graph. Skip PCG underscore forest, since we're gonna be dealing with forest, so we're gonna make a forest out of this. So in this case we'll have our PCG volume, and which can be also used as our volume. And in this case what I'll do, I'll also make sure that we need to have landscape on, so that means we need to create one. So in this case we're just gonna use a very simple landscape, so let's go and create it. And we can just turn it off now, and then with this one we can just drag and drop, and of course we're not going to do anything because we don't have anything yet to program on, so we need to open it and create one. So now here we're going to do is to identify things that we need. So in this case what I'm going to do is right click, look for surface sample, since we are actually going to have 3 surface sampler to make sure we have one for grass, one for trees, as well as one for rocks and stones and other things that can decorate our forest. And I'm gonna have 3 of them, so let me just space them up a little bit, so at least we know what we're actually dealing with. And first things, let's start with actually trees here. So I'm gonna move this up there, press C button and create comment, call it trees. And the reason why I create comments is to make sure I'm gonna divide them into specific categories. So since we start with trees, I want to just focus on the tree section here, so let me just space this out a little bit more and so on. Okay, so to start off we want to make sure we are actually trying to identify what exactly we want to do. So in this instance I'm gonna use the trees, so I'm gonna drag it out and look at another pin, and this pin for the input node here I am actually going to call landscape, because we're going to use a landscape data. So in this case we have the landscape, and because that pin, it's a specific pin because it's decided to be working with the surfaces. So in this case I'm going to do is look for the surface, and then we're going to drag it into this, and that surface sample connect with the input, it will basically identify this landscape. And so everything that's reading on this to be spawned on the surface will be basically working with its input that comes with the landscape data here. So since we're using landscape, it will correlate it together with the surface sampler. Another thing is to make sure I'm gonna add transform points. So in transform points, what we'll do in this instance, it will identify the positions of each point that it's going to be literally drawn into the surface, which allows, before it gets anything spawned, static meshes, you want to make sure that points are being sort of divided into positions where it kind of varies and diversifies by changing its offset, rotation, as well as having different scales for the tree. But because now we want to make sure it actually has some sense meaning behind it, so what I'm going to do, click on surface sampler, right click and go on debug mode, and as you may see now, different cubes being gray out depending on the variations that's been placed out on the surface. It will basically identify that this is the surface that's been taken over. It's been literally rendered with those cubes to show how trees will be populated and distributed across the surface. So that's fine because this is what we actually want. So in this case, we want to make sure also that with our tree, we are going to have our points extend set to sort of like 400, which means we want to slightly have them spaced out from each other. So that will be nice to have that extension here, that every time trees are being spawned later, they will be literally placed between x and y z values within the surface that's available for the surface sampler here within the volume. Another thing I will definitely do is to make sure our transform points is set up too. So in this case, let's try it. So let's, for debug mode, you can also press D, or just go right click and just go and debug. And then now, as you may see, the scales is quite too big. So because we're using transfer points, and what it does at the moment, transfer points are actually using at scale 1. Because we can also resize it to something like 0.5. So the minimum scale would be 0.5 and the maximum would be 1. So as you may see, things start to take place here. And let's try the same thing for our rotation. So in this case, what I'm gonna do is to make sure the rotation is between minus 180 as well as between minus 180 and also 180. So I'm gonna post this here. So I'm gonna put minus, which is the Z value here. So as you expand, you can see that value for rotation minimum is minus 180, and then here we have 180. Okay, now we can minimize this. So let's go back, and now as you can see how randomly they are being placed. And the same thing you can do with offsets here. So I can just place like 10, minus 10, let's say, and then the X values on the 10 on max, and the same goes for Y, and so on. So let's leave it like as it is. So I'm gonna now save this. And also what I'm gonna do is to now disable this, and I'm gonna look for static mesh spawner. So this is the main part that we're actually looking for, since we created logic how surface sampler is being connected with transform points, and transform points sends the information as like transformation for the points that's being not only distributed but also spawned on the surface. Now this information is being sent to static mesh, which in this instance we are going to use for the tree. So once you select static mesh spawner, I'm going to click on a few times. So I'm going to have 3 different types of trees. In this case, I'm going to look for a specific one, so I'm really interested in. So in this case, I'm going to set this to something like this SM underscore European tree, and I'm gonna look for something like maybe F05. Let's do the same thing for another tree. It might take some time to prepare static meshes, so just bear with that. Let me try set another one. So in this case, I'm definitely looking for, let's look for the shortcut way. So I'm gonna force 08. I think it's 08, the last one, yeah? There you go. And I'm gonna do the same thing for another index, which is down here. So, and another tree I'm gonna look for is the forest 02. Yes, that's the one. Yeah, there you go. So now, with this one, I'm pretty much satisfied. I can close all of them. And then for now, we have a very simple setup for the trees network here for the PCG graph. So with this one in mind, we can just save that. And as you may see, our trees start to take place. So now, watch this. So I'll go back to transfer points, just like we did this, right? So I'm gonna slightly make it a little bigger so that everyone can see this. So with my transfer point selected, I can literally go and set it to back to 1. As you may see, trees are started to change their size accordingly between 1 to 1. However, what if I go 1, let's say 8? So that goes between 0.8 to 1 value, okay? Which is kind of fun because you can actually adjust those size scale depending however you want to. So then I can save this now. And the cool is that with this surface sampler, we can actually go and extend it however we want to. As you may see, it does start to place around the trees and start to duplicate it, and depending how you scale your volume, which is fine because this is what we want. And another thing I will definitely suggest to do is start adding other important assets. In this case, I'm gonna start off with a grass. So let's go back to our graph, and then for what we have already, I'm gonna actually use the same methodology we did before. So I can literally copy all this let's change a few values here. So let's go to transfer points. Let me reset those, and I'm gonna leave it as it is, and I'm gonna basically use the offsets we have here because I wanted to make sure the grass when spawned, it doesn't behave like it sort of follows the track of grid distance in between each other. So in other words, they doesn't look like they're close to each other in a grid formation. They're gonna be kind of spread out in a sense that it will be very diversified in terms of their location and so on. So we can do the same thing actually with scale too. So it kind of gives a little bit tint of differentiation there, so that it doesn't look exactly the same grass that's been spawned next to each other. So maybe you're gonna give a little bit of that value, like 1 point, maybe it's let's leave it 1. This is like maybe 0.8 as well. Okay, so let me connect these, and I think for now I think we're gonna be okay. So let's give it a go and test it out. So what's going to look like if I start putting, because apologies, because we need to swap this to our grass here. So let me just get rid of this, and I'm gonna add the grass. The one I'm looking for specifically is the one from the other assets that I've downloaded from the marketplace. And then let me check this once more. And I think the one I'm looking for, so I think it's called, if I call it SM grass bush 04 or something I was using before. Yes, that's pretty much it. I might as well add another grass just so it gives a bit of that extra variation. And actually in this case I'm not gonna actually use grass, I'm gonna actually add some like seedlings, so that gives you a different plants to use for this exercise. So in this case I'm gonna go call it seedling, it's what its name is, and then let me have a look. I think we're good. Alright, so let's give it tested out. Oh well, we got something. It looks a bit spaced out. That's not something we're definitely particularly looking for, and it's definitely wrong. But because it's very easy to fix this, there's no problem. That's the only way you can actually get that going, is to change their number here in Surface Sampler, so we can actually make it a little bit closer to each other. So the way you can do is basically what we've done before points extends. We have to go another way around, so we need to decrease it to something smaller values. And also now, before we do any more, we need to also increase that to something like 1. Ready? So now we got all the variations of different plants and so on. So maybe let's try also increase a bit for our tree. So let me just go 0.5, but then go a little bit closer to each other. All right, cool. I think we'll be okay. Let me try maybe 200. All right, I think I need to go 300 because we need to see what's happening on our ground here. So it'll be nice to have the better viewing. So now what we have left off here is the goal for our rocks. For this one, I'm actually going to play around a little bit more complicated graph. So we have already set up for our trees as well as grass. So let me actually go and comment this. So let's call it grass here. So at least we know that what we're dealing with here. So so now, because we don't want to repeat the same process what we've done here, we're gonna have the same method, but we are gonna differentiate in a way that every time the rock's being spawned on the surface, it will literally avoid any overlapping, but it's also anything that pops out right in front of the rock will be removed, right? Having the rock being spawned. So that's something that we're gonna actually introduce here by doing some difference technique. So in this case, we're gonna use some of these kind of nodes that helps us to do that. So in this case, what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna copy this. I'm gonna stick it right here, but also I'm just gonna reset the entire thing. I don't want to use the same sort of settings before, but without anything else, I can actually stick to our rotation. But I think I'm gonna sort of like maybe change the bit scale here. So maybe instead of going 1, I'm gonna go for 2. So they have a bit of extra variation of rocks being spawned right on the surface of the landscape. So in this case, what I'm gonna do is to start looking for ways how I can make it popping out between the trees as well as grass. So I'm gonna go and look for cold difference node. So in this case, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use the tree source because I'm gonna use it for the trees, and I'm gonna stick as our the trees are gonna be our difference. So let me just take it out. Our trees will be our difference. and this would be our source. So, and of course to make it work, because we have to also identify what is it that makes the difference between the trees and the objects that's going to be spawned. And in this case, we're gonna actually use the rocks. Okay, so I'm gonna look for, let me just remove these, and I'm gonna add an array. In this case, I'm gonna look for the rocks that I really want to work with on my project. So in this case, this is the one we're looking for. So this is our s_mossy_boulder. So let's go back and use this one as it. So I'm gonna go write s_mossy_boulder, and let's connect this together. It will give us this little subgraph link here. So let's try this up. So if I save that now, technically I should be getting some rocks. So the rocks are not appearing from now. But let's have a look. What is it that problem comes up with? Ah yes, because I just realized I haven't connected here as well to the surface. We just go, and there we go. Yes, here we go. So as you might start seeing that rocks started to appear randomly and way too many of them. And let's get them clean a little bit, because this is not something we really wanted. And of course you can see there's some overlapping here, but before we go fix this, let's go and sort of like clean up here a little bit. Let's go 1, and I'm gonna increase to something like 200, and maybe go, let me try see if I can go a little bit more, like 300 possibly. I think it would be much more natural flow. Okay, let's leave it as it is. Let me go 300 as well. We don't really need this because this only for Z value, because we just need this, the X and Y value here. I think with this one I'm happy. Okay, so another thing is sometimes you might encounter this issue with it literally overlaps with other rocks here, so the trees itself. So in order to kind of get rid of this issue, we need to also use called self-pruning, which means it helps to kind of remove any overlaps that comes with. So in this case, let's go and introduce this node, which should be here between the bit transfer points as well, difference node. So right click, look for call self-pruning. All right. So now I can connect this one. Make sure you disconnect that from source and connect it to the source. So it should be fine now. So if you can look around where the rocks are, we need to do the same thing for our trees here too. So in this instance, we need to check whether the values are not only correct, but works out with the rocks being spawned on the surface of the landscape. So let's just have a look. There might be some little overlapping, but we can also fix this is to make sure we don't have many stones out of here, so rocks as well. So in this case, what we can actually do is go back to our rocks, and you can actually change those values to anything that you want to closer work with. Another thing I will possibly look at is also make sure your density function is working at not minimum but at binary. So make sure your difference is set to binary. Yeah, so that also resolves the issue of any overlapping that comes with the formation once the rocks start to appear on the surface. So that's okay, that's cool. So let's go save that. Another thing I will definitely look is to also change your pruning type. In other words, set this to something that's sort of closely working very well with that surface here, especially in that environment that we have. So that should be enough for now. So let's have a look closely what it looks like all together. And I think we can now move this so that we can make it a bit cleaner. So yeah, let's have a look, and then I'm gonna save this first, and I'm gonna comment this. So we're gonna call this rocks. I'm gonna make this black darker. All right, I think we are good to go. Yeah, so I can save it, and now we have like a little PCG formation else. And then what I'll do next lesson, we're gonna use this as our foundation to create very cool tools with that. And also then you can use this to modify the numbers of rocks that have been sort of spawned. The same goes for trees as well as for grass. The numbers of each asset being spawned next to each other, instances, and you can change their numbers depending on how you want to. And the next lesson I'll show you how actually to do this. And then also we can maybe look into slightly optimizing what is it that needs to be done. And also not to forget, I'm also going to show you how you can actually add the river. And then you can actually set up your river and make it flow across this entire surface here. And I'll show you how to actually set this up. Thank you guys, and see you guys in the next chapter.